There is an incredibly bizarre saga brewing around one of the most promising wonder kids in the game. If you haven't heard his name before, you are now, and it probably means you don't live in Germany or watch the Bundesliga. Jan Diomande, who currently plays for RB Leipzig. Oh, I've made videos about this guy before because he has quite literally come out of nowhere, and to me serves as the greatest example that there is a lot of untapped talent in high school soccer and so on in the United States. Because 3 years after he was playing high school soccer, less like 2.5 years after he was playing high school soccer in the United States, he is now being valued at pretty preposterous amounts of money. Like we're seeing news articles today. This is really what made me spit out my drink initially about him. That they're looking at 88 million pounds. That's that's $100 million for this kid. You want to talk about value? You could have signed this guy for free 2.5 years ago. That is just scratching the surface of the potential of the United States is a very large country, the huge sporting infrastructure in which 10% of people consider soccer their favorite sport, and perhaps most importantly, as the Bundesliga has kind of figured out already, a lot of basically all of the talented young players in the United States are free. Pulisic, free. Right? All these guys are free because the MLS academies just aren't big enough to accommodate all of them. And there's huge gaps in terms of where the MLS academies can look. Sorry, I'm getting lost in the wrong argument because what's happening is apparently nobody knows which agency is representing Jan Diomande. And by that, I mean he had an agent, and then it was announced that he had signed with a new agency, and the first agency had no idea that that was happening, which is one of the weirdest controversies ever. And considering we're talking about the fact that we're looking at a kid who very clearly, very quickly is going to be sold for valued at around 88 million pounds, right? There's a ton of money in Jan Diomande, right? If you're an agency, if you're a management company, just looking at the transfer and the contract, the amount of that money that ends up crossing your desk, this is a gold mine. I mean, you're sitting on a gold mine. Now, the original agency that Jan Diomande was working with was the agency owned by Max Gradel. Max Gradel is a longtime player for the Ivory Coast. He played at Leeds from 2009 to 2011 for some reason. This Telegraph article, feels the need to kind of mark that out as well. But, he now runs a management company called Maxidel Management. On February 6th, it was announced by Rock Nation, which is Jay-Z's sports, agency group. It's one of the big sports agency groups in the United States. It also represents Vinicius Jr. and Gabby Martinelli. It's a flashy, kind of star forward type of agency group that's worked with guys like LeBron James, right? Like this is one of the talismans of sports representation, and it is making its way into the world of soccer, and getting a young rising superstar who grew up in the United States named Jan Diomande onto that payroll is obviously maybe Jan's looking to tap into that, the American advertising market, tap into that Western, the new world kind of advertising. I don't know what they sold him on, right? I'm sure they have a very impressive package of things that they're able to offer their clients and whatever, probably more than what Maxidel Management's able to do. And so they made this announcement on February 6th. The Jan Diomande, his profile goes up on the Rock Nation website. They said, welcome to the family. His biography going alongside Vinicius and Gabby Martinelli, and I'm assuming other athletes that they try to continue to penetrate the soccer market. It seemed pretty cut and dry until all of a sudden Maxidel Management came out and said, that the player, they released a statement that insisted the player remains contractually bound to their agency. And in fact, on January 1st, on Instagram, it announced it had renewed its contract with Jan Diomande, and they thanked him for his loyalty, a thank you that maybe they would like to take back right about now. Really interesting about this whole situation is I don't know who to blame. Right? Is Jan Diomande being a snake here? I mean, it's not like anybody knows a lot about this kid. All right, he basically trialed with a couple of clubs after playing USL amateur ball in the United States, and then going back to playing in high school, trialed with a couple of clubs. Leganes took a shot on him. Pretty much immediately, he ended up in the Leganes first team. They got $17.5 million for him from the super scouts over at Red Bull. He ends up at Leipzig, which is the top of the Red Bull pyramid. And he has 9 goals in 22 league matches for RB Leipzig. He's just the guy clearly he hasn't even found his level yet. He just keeps going up. And I have made the argument in the past talking about Jan Diomande. We don't really know how good this kid can be because he hasn't been involved in the academy system. He hasn't been involved in that European kind of conveyor belt of talent where there is a roadmap for this, right? He is pretty similar to Christian Pulisic in a lot of ways, and that he just appears. All of a sudden, he appears in the academy at Dortmund because they decide to take a shot on him after he shows out for the U.S. national team. So it's not completely similar because this was like a trial outside of the national team sphere. But Pulisic was not in an academy, like an MLS academy in the United States. He goes to Dortmund, and then all of a sudden, in the same way that Leganes is sitting there, they go, oh shit, this guy's really good. And then all of a sudden, they end up in the first team at 17 or 18 years old in Diomande's case. And you're just going, damn, like, wow, we lucked into that. We were able to scoop this guy up and make it work. Now, of course, both those guys were able to make the move before 18 because Pulisic, I think through one of his grandparents, has a Croatian passport, and Jan Diomande was born in Abidjan before moving to the U.S. at a young age. So he was Ivorian, which, helps in this case, and it opened it up for him to be able to make that move. It also means he's a non-EU player in the Spanish leagues, which was really helpful for Leganes. Like if he was just American, they probably wouldn't have been able to do it because you can only have 3 non-EU players, and basically all of Africa counts as EU when it comes to the Spanish leagues. Deep ball knowledge for you, but the Ivorian nationality is probably what ended up landing him with Leganes. All of this is to say, we don't really know who this guy is. I mean, like we do, but there is not a good understanding of what his personality is. It's kind of like Lamine Yamal, the first year that he was around. It's like, well, we're just figuring this out. Right? He's emerged so quickly. We are just figuring out what type of guy this is. Is he the type of guy that fucks off his old agency? Is the old agency just trying to play scummy tactics? I don't know. Right? But they released a statement. Max Gradel's agency said, it's therefore with great surprise that we are now discovering that an engagement may have been made in parallel with another agency outside of any proper procedure and without respect for our contractual rights. In light of the situation, Max Gradel management will take all the necessary measures to protect its rights and defend its interests through the appropriate legal channels. Of course, this is all going to be playing out at the same time that Jan Diomande is apparently going to be negotiating a move. Now, if you're a club, who the fuck do you negotiate with? Rock Nation? Max Gradel? Do you call them both? Do you try to just call Diomande and be like, who the hell am I talking to? Right? Both of these companies are going to be probably talking to clubs trying to represent Jan Diomande. Then Jan Diomande is going to have to probably step out and make it clear which one's actually representing him. How could it affect this row affect the summer move? The situation will need clarity, with Max Gradel saying it will be willing to make a legal challenge. The Court of Arbitration for Sport is the highest court a dispute such as this can go. The situation is seen by Max Gradel as an obstacle to a smooth summer move from RB Leipzig, which everybody is anticipating. But I just don't, I mean, clearly, here's what I know. Clearly something weird has happened. We just don't know who has done the weirdness. And it's very possible that maybe they just show up with a little paycheck or like whatever, like, hey, Max Gradel management or whatever, this is what we're going to give you. And, we'll pay you like 1% of this or 1% of that is a fee for the fact that we broke this contract. I don't know. But the way that the Max Gradel management people are talking about, it sounds like Jan Diomande's gone. He just wants to be at Rock Nation. And look, if you grew up in the United States, I mean, Rock Nation represents Rihanna. They represent LeBron. This is a sexy agency to be on. And this kid was in high school 2.5 years ago this would have been beyond a pipe dream that he'd be in this situation now. Of course, he wants to go to Rock Nation. I don't even really blame him. I don't even think he's a terrible person if Jay-Z calls him, right? And those Rock Nation dudes show up and he's like, hell yeah. And then he just totally forgot that he was already signed to another, management company, right? Because no offense to Max Gradel management, it's just not as sexy of an option, especially for a kid that grew up in the U.S. And I'm speaking as a kid that grew up in the United States, right? Rock Nation would be like the pinnacle, especially outside of baseball, which has its own agency culture, right? There's just this, the one. And that's the one across all different, like I said, they represent Rihanna. This article says they represent DJ Khaled as well. Like just, people that in all different facets, not just in sports. They've also repped Lukaku, De Bruyne, Right? That sort of stuff's mentioned in this article too. So I get that he would want to go, and I don't think it makes Diomande a bad person if he wants to go. But we don't even know if this was Jan Diomande's fault, right? I would say the last problem for somebody like Jan Diomande when you make this move is that he doesn't necessarily have a team in place the way other people would have a team in place for longer to try and handle this stuff. Right, he only signed with the Max Gradell's agency for his move from Leganes to RB Leipzig. Right, he's kind of putting this all together on the fly because his talent has outstripped any apparatus that can keep up with him. Right, this kid's just unbelievable. And so he doesn't have managers that he's known since he was 14. His parents don't necessarily know what they're doing because they haven't been involved in this shit at this level the way that, the parents of Endrick or whatever have been involved in this shit since he was 13 or 14, right? Jan Diomande, this is all like the last year and a half that they're all trying to figure this out. And so he might have just gotten some bad advice from somebody. I don't know. But the reason it's worth keeping an eye on is even though I said it could go away quickly, it could also not. This could become a giant mess, right? And this is a kid that Liverpool wants, Manchester United wants, Tottenham wants, of course, Bayern wants him because they're the kings of Germany, right? And they all want this kid. And if this shit gets really weird in like legalese in terms of the court of arbitration of sport, it could be something that throws a wrench in that whole transfer saga. And the first team that's actually able to navigate it and get through to Jan Diomande and whoever he wants representing him is actually going to be the one that wins the signature. But I think after evaluating all of this, it's pretty clear Jan Diomande just wants to be with Rock Nation Sports, and they're just going to have to figure out a way to pay out compensation for this contract. And considering he's about to go through a massive transfer, I would imagine that's going to be pretty easy.